How can you really know where something was made, or even what it's made of? It's easy to tell with real life things, but what about the content on our screens? Now more than ever, verified authenticity is critical, especially with the advent of AI. That's why a global community, including companies, organizations, and civic leaders, have come together in the Content Authenticity Initiative. The movement's goal is to promote universal adoption of content credentials, the open standard for content authenticity and provenance that can be attached to images, video and audio files, documents, and more. Think of it as a digital nutrition label. Camera and software companies are already including it in their products. You can choose to embed content credentials in your files and make it clear for people to review. You can interact with this icon to see the origin and edit history of the file. Content credentials can be stored in the cloud for added durability. The underlying technology implements the C2PA open standard, and the Content Authenticity Initiative is helping make it more widespread with free open source tools. On top of that, we're working with educators, policymakers, creators, and the industry to speed up the adoption of content transparency. Together, we can create a world with trust and transparency built into what we create, share, and see online.
All right, here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our final community event of the year. I'm Colleen Jose, and I lead community and editorial efforts here at the CAI. I'm sure many of you are getting ready for the holiday break, and there's a lot to wrap up. Other places you could be, so thank you so much for joining us and spending your time today. We're a global group. I can see, let me look at the chat. We're joined by Sheldon in Vancouver, Luke in Oregon, Leah in Ontario, Idaho, Oxford, Germany. We're all here. Thank you so much. And we have a full program ahead, so let's get into it. Quick thing, we do have a Q&A pod at the bottom center of your screen. So if you have questions throughout the program, please add it there, and we'll get to them at the end during our Q&A panel with our speakers. Another aspect of your panel screen here, we have a links page in the right of your panel. So if you click there, you'll see all of the links we'll be posting and other resources that may be of interest, including scientific papers, videos, and many of our member spotlights, which I'll walk through today. So you're going to want to stick around because today we're going to answer this question, and that's what makes content credentials durable? For those joining us for the first time, what is content credentials and why does it matter? Content credentials is the C2PA industry standard for tracing and expressing the origins and history of an image, audio, video, and content generated with AI. As many of you know, the C2PA, or the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, develops and sets the technical specifications for content credentials. And all of us here are adopting it or aware of it in some way. You've probably seen it likened to a digital nutrition label for assets, or one of my favorite analogies, it's like luggage for your content. It travels with your file wherever it goes. But what happens when your luggage isn't on the carousel? Somehow along the way in its journey, the tag was snagged off, someone mistook it as their own, or worse. Your content credentials don't have to be lost. It can persist when websites or social platforms remove it. It can persist in the face of screenshots and rebroadcast attacks. And so while the C2PA standard focuses on this new kind of signed metadata, it also specifies how, when combined with invisible watermarks and content fingerprinting, it can offer the most comprehensive solution for expressing content provenance. My colleagues who are joining me today, John Kalamas and Shruti Agrawal, will dive into this, including demoing a new and exciting development, content credentials on physical and printed objects. And the CI community, many of you here, have been super busy this year implementing and adopting these techniques for durability. So before we dive in, we'd like to spotlight a few CII members and highlight 3 implementations you can start using today. The first is Overlay, and I see we're joined by Luke Newman, one of their co-founders and CEO. It's a free mobile app that combines invisible watermarks with blockchain technology. And this empowers creators to add content credentials to their work on the go. And while the C2PA spec contemplates and supports the use of blockchain technology, it's not a requirement. Overlay was co-founded by renowned National Geographic photographers Paul Nicklin and Myrna Meyer. The app offers creators the flexibility to both opt out or opt in to AI training models, which creates a path for unlocking new avenues for monetizing unused work. Luke here, we were speaking the other day, and he described this to me as you could be in the field creating hundreds of images of a polar bear and only use one of those images. So Overlay's video data set with opt-in credentials attached is currently trending on Hugging Face. So be sure to check them out. Overlay has a thriving community of artists and a library of over 1 million assets with the goal of helping creators push ethical AI forward. Next, Adobe Content Authenticity. It's a new and free web app available today in private beta. Signing your work with this app means the ability to add your social media accounts and other information in bulk, and starting with image files today. With Adobe Content Authenticity, you can add your name, your social media accounts to get attribution and drive discovery back to your work, wherever it ends up. You could also indicate a do not train tag to Gen AI models that respect this setting. And the theme of today's conversation, it's durable, as each file gets signed in the app includes secure metadata, an invisible watermark, and content fingerprint. So here's that link to join the private beta. We'll also post it in the chat. That's content.authenticity.adobe.com. Last but not least, in the spotlight of implementers, let's talk about PixelStream and how they're providing an authentic media workflow from capture, edit to publishing. This includes a mobile capture app, an editing tool that supports design assets like fonts. And for content creators and publishers in the audience, music to your ears here, publishing through PixelStream enables responsive images and optimized files. These are published with content credentials without the need to create multiple files or store images locally. And it's as simple as dragging and dropping files. In the background, all of that signing with content fingerprints, metadata, watermarks, and file optimizations are done for you. So be sure to check them out. PixelStream's co-founders Tim Murphy and Aaron Oberhauser are with us today. They're also in CAI Discord talking about all of this and how they use CAI's open source tools. So now you've seen a few active implementations of durability in the wild. Let's now look under the hood and do a deeper dive into what makes content credentials durable. I'd like to introduce and bring up my colleague, John Kalamos. Just gonna find him here and bringing him up on the stage. There we go. Feel free to turn your camera and mic on, John. John is a senior principal scientist at Adobe, where he leads research for the CAI and 2 cross-industry task forces within the C2PA. John's also, excuse me, a professor at the University of Surrey, where he is the founder and director of Decade, the UKRI Research Centre for the Decentralized Creative Economy. His research focuses on media provenance to fight misinformation and online harms, and on improving data integrity and attribution for responsible AI. Welcome, John. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks, Colleen. Now that we've heard a little bit about the ecosystem, in this session, I'll take a deep dive into durable content credentials, explaining what they are and how they work. So just to recap, content credentials are all about communicating provenance, just like a nutrition label for your digital content. And just like a provenance label on food, content credentials are a label on media that tells me where that piece of content has come from and how it was made. One big use case for content credentials is in helping us fight misinformation and fake news online. Now, there's a lot of techniques out there that will tackle this problem by trying to detect manipulation of content or whether AI was involved in producing the content. And when you think about it, this detection approach can only solve one part of the problem. And that's because not all synthetic or edited content is misinformation or fake news. Many people use tools like generative AI or digital photo editing to tell authentic stories. And conversely, if you talk to human rights organizations like Witness.org, who produced the report cited here, they'll tell you that most visual misinformation isn't manipulated at all. It's unaltered content that has been misattributed to tell an alternative story, a false story. So fighting misinformation by detecting manipulation, you're only addressing the small intersection of these two areas. And within that intersection, you're locked in an arms race with generative AI, and nothing moves faster than generative AI. So instead, we look at provenance as a solution, and we provide users with more information about the origins, the provenance of an asset, like an image here, in order to enable them to make more informed trust decisions about the content they encounter. So content credentials then are an open cross-industry standard for describing provenance, and it works by putting that information in the metadata of an asset, like an image. And this standard has been developed by the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, or C2PA, and content credentials is like the user-facing name for that. Now, there's quite a lot of jargon that comes around with C2PA. The metadata that stores that provenance information is called a manifest. And inside that manifest, we have provenance facts, which we call assertions. And these are facts about how the content was made, like what sort of actions were performed, even what other assets were used to create that content, which we call ingredients. And basically, this manifest then describes the full provenance history of the asset. And all of this is wrapped up in what we call a claim inside that metadata, which is cryptographically signed and bound to the asset using a cryptographic hash, which we call a hard binding. Now, despite major adoption of content credentials, particularly this year with all of the elections and interest around those, there is one sort of weakness, and that is the fact that metadata is often stripped away by content platforms, like, for example, social media. In fact, all social media sites currently will strip away this content credentials metadata along with other metadata, even some that indicate the presence of the credential in their platform. Actually, when they serve up the image, the metadata isn't there anymore. And of course, if you perform other operations like screenshotting an image or even printing an image out, obviously that's going to remove any metadata that was there in the asset as well. So this is why we need a durable form of content credentials. So a durable content credential helps that nutrition label I spoke about stick better to content, and it does so using a combination of three techniques. There's metadata, but there's also invisible watermarking and fingerprinting. They're the three facets of durable content credentials. And this enables the durable content credential to persist through platforms that don't yet implement C2PA, like those social media sites I mentioned, or screenshotting, printing, and so on. Now, it's important to note that though durable content credentials can persist through these platforms, they're not a defense against a determined actor that wants to strip or remove that credential. That can always be done by a determined adversary. The goal is to survive the credential through platforms or processes that don't typically preserve metadata. So I mentioned three technologies behind durable content credentials, and I'm going to keep coming back to these today. So let's define them. First of all, there's metadata, which we've already discussed. This is like the gold standard. So C2PA metadata, content credentials being carried around in an asset. That's the ideal perfect world. They would always be within the asset. But of course, as we've discussed, metadata can be stripped. And that's where these other two technologies come in then. Fingerprinting involves visually matching an image to a database to look up or recover the stripped credentials. And this is done by taking a digital fingerprint or digest of the pixels. That's fingerprinting. Watermarking, the third technology, involves actively injecting an invisible identifier into the image that can also be used to go look up that stripped metadata. So they're the three technologies, and I'm going to speak today about how we can combine them to create durable content credentials. But first, I've got a kind of a real-life illustration, if you like, to help explain these terms a little bit more clearly. Let's look at a real-world example. Maybe we can all relate to this season, thinking about buying goods in a store. Okay, so in this scenario, we have an asset, which is the goods, in this case, a pair of jeans, and we have a price tag associated with the asset, which is a little bit like the metadata that travels around with the asset. And that metadata lets us perform a useful function. Here it's being used to buy the asset, right? But as we all know, what can happen in the store is that price tag, the metadata, can fall off or be stripped, right? But that's no problem because we've all been in this situation in a store. We want to buy the goods anyway. We take it up to the clerk, and they basically know their stock. They can visually match that item to look up the tag, the stripped metadata, and we can still go ahead and make the sale, right? So this is kind of analogous to a fingerprinting lookup on a piece of content. If we go to back to the content credentials, if we find an image without any metadata, like in a screenshot of the display here on the left, we can visually fingerprint it and match it to a database to look up those missing content credentials. So, for example, with Adobe in Photoshop, Lightroom, even our generative model Adobe Firefly, users can opt into their credentials being stored in this manner for recovery with a fingerprint. And you can see here on the right, we have an app called Adobe Content Authenticity. It has an inspect function in it, and you can manually drop an image into that app to view the content credentials metadata. And if there isn't any, because it's been stripped, then you can find possible matches, which will basically do this fingerprint search to recover the stripped credentials. So that's all well and good for the case where a user's forensically kind of dropping an image into an app to check it, using fingerprinting or whatever. But what about when we want to work at scale, like in a browser extension, for example? We might want to automatically scan any images on a web page the user's viewing for missing credentials, and we can't go uploading all of the images that a user views, to a server. It's not going to work for many reasons: privacy, scalability, and so on. So this is where invisible watermarking comes in to offer us a convenience, really. If we can detect a watermark in the image on the client side, within the browser extension, then we can go and look up those missing credentials every time we see a watermark indicating that some should have been there. And here we can see exactly that. Again, it's part of the Adobe Content Authenticity app. There's a browser extension you can download today to try this out. What's happening is the image has got an invisible watermark in it, and it's triggering the retrieval of those missing credentials, which are then displayed here for the user to make that more informed decision about the contents and where it's come from. So to recap then, we have three technologies. First, metadata, which is open standards to embed provenance inside assets in a cryptographically secure, tamper-evident way, but as we've discussed, it's easy to strip. What can we do about it? We can use the other two technologies. We have the reverse image search via a soft hash or fingerprint. You can't strip that, there's nothing to strip, but it's not as exact as a cryptographic hash. So in many ways, it has a kind of complementary attack surface to metadata. Or we can embed an ID in the image as an invisible watermark. That channel is similar to metadata. It's strippable, actually, as we'll discuss. It's substitutable, but at least most benign actors, like a social platform that isn't implementing CTPA, won't strip it if it's robust enough. But it only has really a watermark, only has capacity for a short identifier in it. We can't put the whole credentials in it, unfortunately. So before I talk about how those three technologies are combined for our solution, then we're going to just briefly look at how the watermarking can work. One example of a watermark is Trustmark, which is an open source and free watermarking technology that we've developed. And it's on GitHub under an MIT license. You can play around with it if you have Python. You can pip install it here, as you can see on the right. And the idea here is to help promote adoption of durable content credentials by opening up this technology. And here we can see, magnified many times, the invisible signal that Trustmark puts into an image to carry the message, what we call a residual. And notice it's quite different to some of the other techniques out there. The pattern is what we call low frequency, makes it a lot more robust to surviving the platforms we need it to survive. There's some brief data here on Trustmark. I'm going to refer to the paper linked below for more details, but the key takeaway here is we can see that it scores comfortably above the threshold level of about 40 PSNR, which is like a visual quality metric. Others can do that too, but we also carry with that property also the robustness. You can read more about it in the paper we've released along with the code for Trustmark, as I mentioned, on GitHub. So just thinking about bringing watermarking into our store analogy then, watermarking is a little bit like adding a second machine readable tag into an asset, like those kind of RFID tags you sometimes find in clothes. So even if the price tag falls off, this is like another way of recovering the metadata. You can still scan it and look up the price and make that sale. And obviously, different items like the pink or the yellow item here will have different tags to enable that to happen, different unique tags. Now, this is all well and good, but what if someone transfers the watermark from one asset to another? For example, puts the pink tag on a yellow asset. And in the world of watermarking, we call this spoofing. It's basically transferring a watermark across. And it'll be easy to do that for various reasons in a provenance setting when we have watermarks that we want to be openly decodable, because people will attack the technology. In this case, what we don't want then is that the pink tag gets put on the yellow asset and a sale gets made. So that would be a bad outcome. Okay, this is where fingerprinting then comes in to complete the picture. This is where we unite the three technologies. So if you think, again, in the store analogy, a clerk's not going to sell you an asset they recognize as being the wrong price, right? They're doing a visual check and saying, hey, I'm not fooled by you moving that tag over. I'm not going to sell you that item. They're doing a visual check. So basically, we're sort of combining the watermark with a visual check to recover the metadata or not. And going back to durable content credentials, in this flow diagram here, this is where we see the true value then of these three technologies being combined. The browser extension reads the watermark and recovers the metadata, the manifest containing the content credentials, but before they're returned, a visual check is being performed comparing a fingerprint inside that manifest that's being returned to a fingerprint from the asset bearing the watermark that we took the watermark from, and only if they match are we going to return that manifest. So this provides a safeguard against the spoofing. Okay, so in summary then, we've shown today how three provenance enhancing technologies, metadata, fingerprinting, and watermarking, can be combined to create durability around content credentials. And this allows creators to bring authenticity to their work by creating content credentials that can stick to assets wherever they go, be it online, on social, on displays, and so on, as we've seen. And just as a reminder, the focus on durability is exactly that, the preservation of data through channels that do not or cannot support metadata preservation. It's not durability against all forms of attack. It's proven that all forms of watermark can be strippable by a determined adversary to deny service. But as we've described, durable content credentials, when encompassing all three pillars, can mitigate against spoofing attacks. So finally, I'm going to close by saying that durable content credentials aren't just limited to images, as I've been showing here today, but they can also be applied as a methodology to all kinds of modalities, video, audio, even printed media. And my colleague Shruti will demonstrate that in a moment. So back to you, Colleen.
And I'm going to bring up our colleague, Shruti Agarwal. There we go. Hi, Shruti. So excited to introduce you. Shruti is a research scientist at Adobe Research, focusing on the CAI. Her research focuses on building tools for multimedia forensics and provenance. Before joining Adobe, she was a postdoc at MIT and a lecturer for the computer vision course at Berkeley School of Information. She finished her PhD in CS at UC Berkeley under the guidance of Professor Hani Farid, one of our CAI advisors, in his world-leading lab on media forensics. During her PhD, she developed semantic tools using soft biometrics for person-specific deepfake detection. Her research has recently focused on robust watermarking and content attribution, which we'll see all here. Welcome. I know you have some cool demos for us, so I'm going to leave you to it.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Colleen, for the introduction, and thanks, John, for explaining the fingerprinting and watermarking technology. So today I want to demo of a few work that we are working on, which is built on these two technologies, on fingerprinting and watermarking, and that showcase how the durability of content credentials can be super useful in many real-world applications. So let me start sharing my screen, where I want to first show this example. I want to start with this example video, where imagine that I found this video online and I really like this video and would love to find the original video to license it for my work. I want to license that original video for my work. And if that original video was created using content credentials, then I can use the video fingerprinting technology to look up that original video using this clip that I found online. And by doing that, I can get to the original content credentials attached to the original video, where I can find the link to the original video on Adobe Stock, where I can license it for my work. All thanks to the durability of the content credentials that it stays with its assets. The another example that I have here is this 8-second long clip that my friend shared with me. And he says that he created a much longer video during his vacation, and he's looking for that. And I am glad that my friend created the video with content credentials in it. And now, just by using this 8-second clip, I can get to the original 1 minute 51 second original video. As you can see, that original video that is shown on the right hand side is 1 minute 51 second. And I can also see where my 8-second query clip lie in the original video. It lies at the 38-second mark. And not only this, using the video fingerprinting technology, we can also see the difference between the two query clips, where highlighted on the bottom row is the difference between these two query clips, where we see that one of the kid in the original video was removed in the query clip. So we can imagine that this video fingerprinting technology can be super useful in this era, where to identify synthetically edited videos like deepfakes. Let me stop sharing my screen for a bit and move to the second segment of my demo, which was hinted by both Colleen and by John, which is physical provenance. So that means content credentials on physical objects. For demoing that, I have this poster over here that is a beautiful artwork. And I would love that whoever sees this poster can know the artist who created this artwork, and reach to other artworks from that artist and probably create their own merchandise. What if people can do this just by pointing their cameras to this poster, and they will be able to identify who the artist would be. Using our invisible watermarking technology, we can do just that. So this poster, which is printed, has an invisible watermark in it. It's the same technology that John described earlier in his talk. So let me demo that by sharing my screen again. Let me find it. Yeah. So now I have this demo screen over here, where on the left-hand side, it shows the view from my camera, iPhone camera, which is hooked to my computer. And whenever I point an image on in front of my camera that has content credentials to it, then that image will start popping up on the right-hand side. So this content credentials are found by detecting invisible watermarking present and that watermarking is mapped to the content credentials. So here we can see that content credentials has been identified in this image. And once we have identified the watermark and content credentials, we can go to the inspect tool from Adobe Content Authenticity. Let me click on this button that will take me to the uh, Content Authenticity app. Let me share my screen again. So this is the page that we can reach once the content credentials has been identified in an image, where we can see that the artist who created it, tools that were used to create this, and who issued these credentials. So again, pointing that this is the inspect tool from Adobe Content Authenticity web app. Now, let me move to other examples for the printed object. This is not it. Um, And I have actually created my own merchandise using the artworks from the same artist, um, and other artworks. So now I have this as on this mouse pad over here. Let me align this. Yeah, this is a mouse pad where I have printed um, another artwork from the same artist. And now let me just bring it closer to my camera app to see if we can identify content credentials in this artwork as well. And as the image is displayed, as we can see, the image it has popped up on the right hand side, which indicates that again, in our content credentials has been identified in this image. And again, we can go to the inspect tool to see that the same artist has created this artwork as well. And last but not the least, I have printed this artwork that I showed earlier on this tote bag. And let me again see whether our credentials, as we can see, our credentials can still be identified on this tote bag as the image on the content credentials image page, image panel is moving. So, with this durability of content credentials, I hope we can get credited for our work no matter where it goes. Um, and it will definitely help us improve transparency in what we see both in online world and in our physical world. Thank you.